Hello, I'm Chad Hembree with All About Berea, and I am sitting here to do a nice little interview with some representatives from the Bereans for Fairness, and this is Kate Grigg and Megan McKinney.
Yeah.
Well, what we wanted to get you in here is to just share a little bit about what is the agenda for Bereans for Fairness. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And why? Maybe we can dispel some myths if there are some people that believe things that maybe aren't true, or answer some questions. Just want to give you kind of an open platform to educate people a little bit about your cause.
Okay, cool. I'll start. It's pretty simple what we want. Essentially, right now, state and federal law do not include protections based on sexual orientation or gender identity. So gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered individuals don't have any legal recourse if they face discrimination. And what we want is simply to close that gap in the law so that we're focusing on Berea because this is where we live, and because we can have the town make an amendment to the current law so that it includes sexual orientation, gender identity, so that if someone was discriminated in areas of housing, public accommodations, or employment, that they would have a legal avenue to pursue to find some kind of resolution.
Okay, and this is a part of a greater movement, right? You're a small piece of a greater movement.
Sure, yeah, there's, across Kentucky, there are movements similar to this that are loosely tied, but essentially each city has their own thing going on. They're trying to get similar things passed in their own city. And ultimately, we would love for the state to have a law passed that would, or amend the current law to include the protected classes of sexual orientation and gender identity.
Okay, well, before we go into more questions about fairness itself and then agenda, ordinance, I said agenda and then ordinance. Let's talk about the groups involved, and because we hear so many different groups, right? We have the coalition, we have Kentuckians for Fairness, right? Is that, or?
Well, there's Kentuckians for the Commonwealth, but they're a separate.
Okay.
They are often folks in Kentuckians for the Commonwealth are allies in this cause,
Okay.
but they're. And
then the Bereans for Fairness. Okay. Now, what do the shirts that say "Another Proud Kentuckian for Fairness"? Which group had put those out?
The resources for those came from the Fairness Coalition.
Okay.
They are the statewide group of 4 other groups that came together all to pool the resources to try to work on this, to provide support for communities that want this kind of thing passed. So Bereans for Fairness is, local folks who are interested in it, but we're not, like a nonprofit organization. We're just concerned citizens. So having the support of an organization like the Coalition that is a nonprofit can provide additional resources and support in that way, like t-shirts and things like that to help with visibility and educational materials and things like that.
Good. All right. Well, I just wanted to, we see different names, and I want people to kind of understand where it comes from, and that there's not a national organization that really tells you all what to do.
No.
You're your own entity, but you have chosen to work with these larger groups that support your cause.
Right, exactly.
All right. Let's start at the very top. Why do you think these protected classes are needed in Berea? Where do you see the other than just in a feel-good theory thing? Because that's how people are. Everybody wants everyone to be treated fair. At least I hope they do. But I want to know kind of meat behind it.
Sure. And I don't want to hog the conversation.
Yeah.
If you want to jump in.
Well, the reason that we need it is because there is that danger that something could happen. At the last city council meeting, Lisa Vaughn commented that there were 4 cases that were brought before the Human Rights Commission, and that one of them was based on sexual orientation, and there was nothing they could do about it. And so the reason that we need this is so that we can do something about it, because we have all of these protections for the other classes, for age, for sex, for race, but why not this class, especially in such a progressive city like Berea? We need some type of protection, some type of preventative measure.
That's fine. I trip over words all the time. Don't feel bad.
every day.
So you have a genuine concern. You have a
Yes.
fear, is what you're saying, that this could happen to someone. And
Yes.
let's talk a little bit in recent history in Richmond. I guess there was an incident, right, in the park.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a lesbian couple that got kicked out of a park. And I forget all the specific details, but they were taking maternity photos, and from what I understand, they shared a kiss, and then they were asked to leave because of the kiss that they shared, saying, we don't want you here, that sort of comment. And even though it was, there was witnesses and it happened, there's nothing they can't take that complaint to anybody and say, they can tell people, but there's no legal avenue to follow up and.
So that would fall under the public accommodation.
Yeah.
All right. Do you see any places before your opposition has a turn to talk about it of where you think that that could be an issue when you include something that with age, you can pretty much tell by looking at someone their age. I know that's not always true. For disabilities, oftentimes that can be a visual thing. You can't look at someone and tell their sexual orientation, right? Like their color, or I'm just curious if you ever have thought about the flip side of that. If you have a comeback for the argument that it would be hard to enforce, or that people wouldn't know, or that they would get wrongly accused for making someone leave for a different reason.
Oh, you mean like someone could identify as a lesbian and then be kicked out of a place, and this person had no idea that they were, and then bring a charge against them and say well, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I have a couple thoughts about that, and one is that part of the process that is typically in place when this kind of law is passed is that there is, an investigation process, and so if someone brought a claim, just because someone has a complaint doesn't mean that whoever they're complaining against is going to get in trouble or have recourse or that sort of thing. There's a process that they follow to find out what actually happened. They collect information, documents, and that kind of stuff to try to hear both sides of the issue. And my other thought about that is that the language that we include is having actual or perceived sexual orientation and gender identity, which means that it is perception. Like you can even perceive someone as gay and they're not, and if someone acts on that in a discriminatory manner, that would still be covered under this law.
Well, see, and that's something a lot of people probably do not know, the perception.
Yes.
So, okay, I appreciate that. The next thing would be, we talk about public accommodations. Let's talk about one of the other areas there. Just pick one of them. Protection. Employment, if you want. If you want me to throw it out.
Okay, yeah.
What protections do you think would fall in place of employment?
An employee could bring a complaint if they believe they've been mistreated in the hiring process based on their sexual orientation. It's the same as any of the other classes, and religion is included in there as well, which is another thing that you can't necessarily tell by looking at someone, and you're not supposed to ask in an interview situation unless it's maybe if you're working for a church and that's, there's exemptions there, but it's very similar in that regard, that it's simply shouldn't be an issue.
But once again, the perception can come into play as well, right?
Sure.
So I applaud you for your efforts and really appreciate what you do here in the community by supporting what you stand up for. But as an education piece, which was what the purpose of us meeting here today was, I wanted you to share some facts. Do you have anything available with you, or anything that you want to share that
Well, yeah, I have this lovely sheet right here.
All right.
Okay, sure. Maybe we can take turns, and I'll start with the first bullet point. And we've already covered some of this, but this might be a great way to kind of summarize some of the basic information.
Okay.
The first question on our fact sheet is, would a fairness law protect all Kentuckians from discrimination, or locally would it protect all Bereans? And the answer is yes, because currently, even in Berea, there is a non-discrimination law that has protected classes of actual perceived race, color, religion, national origin, sex, age over 40, disability, familial status, and that's all. And so those are already included already, and we just want to add sexual orientation and gender identity. So it's not taking anything away from anyone else, it's simply closing the gap so that this group, people, even based on perceived or actual sexual orientation and gender identity, would be included.
Mm-hmm. And so the next question about there being current state and federal laws kind of go along with that, because there are, civil rights acts that protect all of these classes that Kate mentioned about religion, race, gender, disability. And so we want to make sure that sexual orientation, perceived sexual orientation, gender identity, we want to make sure that those are in place for our community so that we can have that protection.
All right.
And then the next question speaks to the religious question of, well, when my church, how does this affect my church? Would we be forced to marry gay people, or would we be forced to hire gay people? And first off, this ordinance has nothing to do with marriage. It's not about saying that people of the same gender should get married. That's not what we're asking for or talking about at all. It's simply non-discrimination law that we're looking for. And again, the religious institutions have an exemption that we're not asking someone to change the religion or to go against the religion at their church to have to let gay people in if they don't want to. Like, they have an exemption already in this law.
Mm-hmm. And so the next question is, as a landlord, would somebody have to rent a room in their house to a gay person? And it's important to note that there are also exemptions in the fairness law for small employers, small renters. As Kate said earlier, it's often less than 8 employees. And so those exemptions can be built into these small little businesses and small renting units.
All right.
And the last question that says, do most people support these types of anti-discrimination fairness protections? And the answer is yes. There was a recent survey by the Shapiro Group, and it found that 83% of Kentuckians support these types of anti-discrimination fairness protections. So we're talking about protections in employment, housing, and public accommodations based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And by and large, across the board, people from urban and rural, people who are religious and non-religious, Democrat, Republican, the majority of folks say, well, yeah, that makes sense, that we agree people should be able to have the opportunity to earn a living, to be able to have housing, to be able to eat at their favorite restaurant without have fear of being turned away just because of who they are.
Well, I thank you both for coming in here today and doing this interview. And I do want to have you back again at some point. I actually have questions, and there's a couple of concerns I have. My concerns are on a logistical platform, though, finance, and I don't want to get into that today. I wanted you to talk about your cause, not have a debate today. So let's just leave it at this, and I appreciate you.